Picture a country that survived the worst financial collapse in modern European history. It accepted hundreds of billions in bailout money, endured a decade of imposed sacrifice, and came out the other side with investment-grade credit ratings and glowing headlines from the financial press. The Economist called it a turnaround story. Bloomberg celebrated its return to the bond markets. The European Commission declared the crisis officially over. That country is Greece. And here is what the headlines did not tell you. The average Greek worker earns less today, in real terms, than they did in 2005. The country's economy is still smaller than it was before the crisis hit. More than 500,000 educated young Greeks left the country and never came back. The healthcare system that collapsed during the austerity years never fully recovered, and the national debt, after 3 of the largest bailouts in human history, is still one of the highest in the developed world relative to the size of the economy. So someone is lying. Either the financial press is wrong, or the Greek people are imagining their own suffering. But there is a third possibility, and it is the one this video is going to prove. The recovery is real. It just was not designed for Greece. To understand what happened, you have to go back to 2001 and to one of the most consequential financial decisions a small country ever made. When Greece joined the Eurozone, it was handed something extraordinary. By adopting the euro, Greece was effectively borrowing Germany's credit score. International investors, who previously demanded high interest rates to lend to a volatile Mediterranean economy, suddenly treated Greek government bonds as nearly equivalent to German ones. The risk premium collapsed almost overnight. What happened next was entirely predictable. Greece went on a spending spree. The government aggressively hired into the public sector. Pensions were generous. Infrastructure projects multiplied. The 2004 Athens Olympics cost an estimated 11 billion euros, roughly double the original budget. And because credit was cheap, nobody asked hard questions about where the money was actually coming from. GDP growth looked strong. Unemployment was falling. On paper, Greece was closing the gap with the wealthy north. But beneath the surface, the economy was not becoming more productive. It was becoming more indebted. Greek household and government debt climbed steadily through the 2000s, financed by French and German banks that were perfectly happy to keep lending as long as the interest kept flowing. Greece was not growing. It was borrowing and calling it growth. And the entire European financial establishment, from Brussels to Frankfurt to Paris, let it happen because the party was profitable for everyone, until the moment it stopped. In October 2009, a new Greek government took office and did something that no one in European politics was expecting. They opened the books. What they found inside those books was not a manageable shortfall. It was a catastrophe. The outgoing government had reported a budget deficit of roughly 6% of GDP. The real number, once the accounting tricks were stripped away, was closer to 15.4%, nearly 2.5 times what had been declared. In a single announcement, Greece had revealed that everything the bond markets believed about its finances was built on fabricated data. The reaction was immediate and savage. Credit rating agencies began downgrading Greek debt in rapid succession. Bond yields, the interest rate Greece had to offer to borrow money, began climbing at a speed that made refinancing the existing debt nearly impossible. Within months, Greece was effectively locked out of the international capital markets entirely. The borrowing that had sustained the Greek state for nearly a decade suddenly had nowhere to go. By early 2010, Greece could not pay its bills without outside help. The country was staring at a default that, given how deeply embedded Greek bonds were inside European bank balance sheets, threatened to trigger financial contagion across the entire continent. The Troika stepped in. The European Commission, the European Central Bank, and the IMF arrived in Athens with a rescue package and a set of conditions. And this is where the story gets dark. The first Greek bailout, agreed in May 2010, was 110 billion euros. The second, in 2012, added another 130 billion. By the time the third programme was signed in 2015, the total had crossed 280 billion euros. It was, by any measure, the largest sovereign debt rescue in history. And here is the question that the financial press never asked loudly enough. Where did the money go? Research published by the Jubilee Debt Campaign found that approximately 77% of the bailout funds flowed directly back out of Greece to service existing debts owed to foreign creditors. French banks, German banks, the European Central Bank itself. The money arrived in Athens and was immediately redirected to Frankfurt and Paris. Greek citizens never touched it. Greek hospitals never saw it. The Greek economy never absorbed it. What Greece received in exchange was not investment, it was the conditions. The Troika demanded what it called structural reforms, which in practice meant cutting pensions, raising taxes, reducing the minimum wage, and selling off state assets at distressed prices to private buyers. The architecture of the Greek welfare state, built over decades, was being dismantled in real time. The logic offered to the Greek public was simple: short-term pain for long-term gain. Sacrifice now so the economy can become competitive and sustainable. It was a compelling argument. It was also, as the next few years would prove in devastating fashion, completely wrong. There is a concept in economics called the fiscal multiplier, and in 2012, the IMF published a quiet but explosive admission about it. Their own internal research had significantly underestimated how damaging spending cuts would be during a deep recession. The models used to design the Greek austerity program assumed that cutting €1 of government spending would shrink the economy by around 50 cents. The actual number, they now acknowledged, was closer to €1.50. In plain terms, austerity was not just painful, it was mathematically self-defeating. Every time the Greek government cut pensions or raised the VAT rate under Troika instruction, consumer spending collapsed. Businesses closed, unemployment rose, tax revenues fell, which meant the deficit stayed stubbornly high, which triggered demands for more cuts, which caused more contraction. Greece was running on a treadmill that was actively accelerating in the wrong direction. Between 2008 and 2013, the Greek economy contracted by more than 25%. To put that in historical context, that is comparable to the decline the United States experienced during the Great Depression, compressed into 5 years. The debt-to-GDP ratio, the number the entire program was supposed to reduce, actually rose during this period because the denominator, the economy itself, was shrinking faster than the debt. The creditors knew this. The IMF's own internal staff reports acknowledged that the projections were not working. The program continued anyway. But the spreadsheets were one thing. What was happening to actual human beings was something else entirely. By 2013, youth unemployment in Greece had crossed 58%. Not 20, not 30. 58% of Greeks under 25 who wanted a job could not find one. A generation was being economically erased in real time. The healthcare system, one of the first targets of budget cuts, began to buckle visibly. Hospitals reported shortages of basic medical supplies. Infant mortality rose. Suicide rates climbed sharply, increasing by more than 35% between 2010 and 2012. Doctors Without Borders, an organisation that normally operates in active war zones, opened clinics in Athens to provide basic medical care to Greek citizens who could no longer afford it. Soup kitchens multiplied across the capital. The Orthodox Church began running emergency food distribution networks that fed tens of thousands of people every week. HIV infection rates spiked, partly because needle exchange programs had been cut as a line item in the austerity measures. Pharmacies ran out of insulin and cancer medications because the state health insurer had stopped paying its bills to suppliers. People with chronic conditions were rationing medication, splitting pills to stretch them further, or simply going without. These were not abstractions. They were the measurable, documented consequences of specific policy decisions made in offices in Brussels, Frankfurt, and Washington. The Greek state had been deliberately stripped down to service a debt, and its people were the collateral damage. By 2015, Greece had found a leader who was prepared to say all of this out loud. In January 2015, Alexis Tsipras and his left-wing Syriza party swept into power on a promise that had never been made before by a European government. They told the Greek people that the austerity program was not an economic necessity. It was a political choice, and they were going to unmake it. Europe's response was immediate. The European Central Bank began tightening the flow of emergency liquidity to Greek banks, a slow financial squeeze designed to make clear what the consequences of defiance would be. Negotiations between Athens and the Troika collapsed repeatedly. By June 2015, Greek banks had closed entirely. ATM withdrawal limits were set at €60 per day. The country was watching its own financial system being choked from the outside. Tsipras called a referendum. On July 5, 2015, 61% of the Greek population voted oxy. No. They rejected further austerity conditions with a majority that shocked even the most optimistic members of his own government. It made no difference whatsoever. Within a week, Tsipras had returned to Brussels and signed a third bailout programme more severe than the one his voters had just rejected. The capitulation was total. The message it sent was permanent. You can vote however you like. The debt still decides. Greece had discovered something that no amount of democratic participation could change. When a country owes enough money to enough powerful institutions, sovereignty becomes a courtesy, not a right. But even that was not the deepest wound. The deepest wound was already quietly leaving the country. Between 2010 and 2020, an estimated 500,000 Greeks left the country. That figure alone understates the damage because of who left. These were not retirees or unskilled workers. They were doctors, engineers, scientists, and software professionals, the precise cohort that any economy needs to generate tax revenue, build companies, and sustain a functioning welfare state. Greek-trained doctors relocated to Germany and the United Kingdom in numbers significant enough that the German Medical Association began publishing recruitment materials in the Greek language. Greek engineers moved to Amsterdam, London, and Berlin. Researchers who had studied at Greek universities on public funding built their careers in laboratories elsewhere in Europe. The economic term for this is brain drain. The human term for it is a generation that was told, implicitly, that their country had no future worth staying for. The long-term fiscal consequences are severe and largely irreversible. A smaller, older, less skilled workforce means lower tax revenues for decades. It means fewer entrepreneurs, fewer startups, fewer patents. It means the Greek state's ability to service its remaining debt depends increasingly on a shrinking population of workers who stayed behind. Many of them employed in low-wage seasonal tourism. By 2023, Greece's population had declined to around 10.4 million, falling steadily for years. The country was aging rapidly and producing children at one of the lowest rates in the European Union. The people who could build the recovery had left to build someone else's. In 2023, Greece's credit rating was upgraded back to investment grade for the first time since the crisis began. Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis called it a historic milestone. The European press celebrated. The numbers, on a certain reading, looked genuinely better. GDP growth was positive. The primary budget balance was in surplus. Greece had returned to the bond markets as a credible borrower. None of that changes what the average Greek household is actually living through. Real wages in Greece remain roughly 25% below their pre-crisis peak. The minimum wage, raised to €830 per month in 2024, is still among the lowest in Western Europe. Housing costs in Athens have surged, driven partly by short-term rental platforms converting residential units into tourist accommodation, which means that younger Greeks who did not emigrate are competing for a shrinking supply of affordable housing in their own capital city. The debt-to-GDP ratio stands at around 160%. Greece is still the most indebted country in the European Union by that measure. The primary surpluses being celebrated today are only possible because the government is spending less than it collects, which is another way of saying the state is still systematically underfunding its own public services to satisfy its creditors. The recovery is not a lie in every sense, but it is a recovery designed to restore the confidence of bond markets, not the living standards of people. Those are two entirely different projects. And the question every heavily indebted government in the developed world should be asking right now is which one of those projects gets the resources when it all breaks down. Greece was not a uniquely incompetent country. It was a moderately dysfunctional one that made a fatal error, borrowing in a currency it could not control, at interest rates it had not earned, from creditors who were not interested in sustainability. When the mathematics broke down, it became a laboratory. The experiment produced findings that should alarm any government carrying significant debt. It demonstrated that sovereign debt, once it reaches a critical mass, ceases to be a financial obligation and becomes a political instrument. It demonstrated that democratic votes can be overridden not by military force, but by the withdrawal of liquidity. And it demonstrated that the institutions charged with managing a crisis will consistently prioritize the stability of the financial system over the welfare of the population caught inside it. Now look at the debt levels of France, Italy, Spain, the United Kingdom and the United States. Each of those countries carries obligations that would have seemed reckless 20 years ago. Each of them operates within a global financial system that has, in Greece, already shown what it is prepared to do when the numbers stop working. Greece was told its suffering was the price of its own mistakes. That story was convenient for everyone who needed the alternative explanation buried. It kept the lesson local. It kept it contained. It kept it from becoming a precedent. The real story is this. Greece was not a warning from the past. Greece is a preview, and the credits have not finished rolling yet. If this video changed how you see the Greek crisis, or if you think the official story is closer to the truth than I've argued, I want to hear that debate in the comments. Tell me which country you think is next. Tell me why you think I'm wrong. That conversation matters, and it starts below. If you are new here, this channel exists to tell the financial stories that the headlines summarize and move on from. Subscribe so you do not miss the next one, and if you know someone who still believes Greece recovered, send them this video, not to win an argument. Because the preview is still running, and the more people who understand it, the harder it becomes to bury.